The forms. You have been hiding. It doesn't feel that way to me. You're not making a move. You're toying with a queen while your knight, distracted, sleeps exposed in the wood. I'm not toying with her. Well, what are you doing? You cannot prolong this through delay, only through action. You think I'm sitting here idle? I know you are not idle, yet still I say you delay. You do what you accuse others of doing because you know I am here waiting for you. Death watched the man and then spoke again. You can scurry about, but it will not help you. I am here waiting, and all the time you grow weaker. Why are you not telling me the story? You have stopped telling me the story. That is your only recourse now. I will tell this story, but right now it's a jumble. It got ahead of me. The storyline became confused. No, it did not. The confusion is simply you pretending that what you believe still exists. I know it does. I felt it again recently, twice, maybe more. But it's more elusive than ever. I am too broken. The transition is too much. It feels like a sand-encrusted comb ripping through my soul, tearing strands of soul fiber as it goes. You are weak. Make your move. Use your pieces. I am waiting. It is just time to me, an everlasting fall of sand, a river of lives. But for you it is not as simple as that, is it? No, for you every grain that falls brings you closer to me. You don't usually talk so much, the man observed. I hear the stories of the sentient, everything that man knows, but this is your time. Very well, the man said, but my voice is gone. I held the woman in my arms and felt nothing. I have only pattern. I'm play acting. You know, I always said I could never act, but my whole life has been pretend. It has been me pretending that I want anything to do with it, pretending that I even have the option, also as to convince people that they should engage me, adopt me, take me into their world or buy into mine. But when it comes down to it, I've got nothing to offer. Even where it seems like it would be a fit, it never is. And today I felt a chill. I opened up, I let her hold me. But the wolf left me there alone. I thought that is what he wanted, but he left me there. With a sniff, he lost interest and walked off to sleep by the door, waiting for her to leave. She had been drinking. She wanted the wolf. He coaxed me to woo for him, and I did. I allowed myself to go there, to that place where I feel, where I change, where I become something else. A beauty, a delicacy, everything the wolf isn't. To skim along the borders of love. To be love, warmth, security, everything loved. And not the wolf, who is as ruthless with me as with any other. I thought the wolf wanted to fuck her, and she gave me her body, and I took it in my hands. I draped her over my lap and touched her. But I can't hear like the wolf, and I found I couldn't read her. That's the wolf's language. He's the one who knows the keys, the notes, the passages. I tried to mimic him, but it only reminded me of how now it's different in the world. Well, words sound the same, but meanings have changed. People look at me blankly. There are too many occasions where the simplest communications become confused. No one knows their own goddamn language. And now the terror is setting in again. The stark realization that I won't fit here either. That nothing I've encountered can actually honestly be said to constitute the basis for any feeling of optimism. Not when seen against its opposition. Not once a full range of pertinent facts have been taken into account. The only courses I see are hardly even courses. They are sacrifices, the acceptance of something unacceptable, the adoption of failure, the loss of dignity, a baseline that doesn't even negate the ever-present risk of total loss, the heroic explosion into death, the fearless acceptance of being drawn into your eyes. The man looked directly, almost accusatorially, at his opponent across the board. To be ground to nothingness in the space of your soul, to fall from your sleeves as you move your pieces in someone else's game, in a million other games. This isn't that. This is the fear. This is the horrendous realization that I remain as incompatible as ever, that I might as well surrender as there's nothing here for me but imprisonment and eventual starvation. And I'm tired of it. All that's left is to talk to you and play out my remaining moves, to let my pieces fall away one by one. Would I not be better off dying now? How is anything improving? Perhaps it is not improving, said the Wraith. Well, I woke up early today, read a book about social development. I'd had it a while, really only got it as a favor, but I was interested, a premier author. Anyway, it was about the role of cooperation, inclusion, and selflessness in the process of natural selection within species. It was interesting, up to a point. The Wraith cut in. You're adding words to delay, padding your story through a pretense of informality. It won't help you. But the man refused to concede. I'll tell my story as I choose to tell it. Those are the rules. You will listen. I'm not keeping you from your duties elsewhere. I know how many boards you sit beside, mocking your prey. I do not sit as at many boards as you may suppose, said the wraith. But if there is a purpose to it, then very well, go on. I was talking about a book I read this morning. It spoke about natural selection, about mutations that are either adopted by the species, by the environment, or not. It described how certain species are so far evolved that they contain members so selfless that they sacrifice their own reproduction for the good of the society, serving as workers, as servants, while others reproduce. Apparently 3 types of insects and humans do this. But with humans, of course, there's a conflict. Not everyone wants to give up their most fundamental instinct. And yet you can't help thinking that the model might solve a lot of the world's problems. And create more, the wraith tested. Perhaps, of course, but I'm not sure. I still fight for women, but why? I had already seen the isolation before it set in. I'd been seeing it for years, the retraction of people, the inability to commit, to really commit. People commit to all sorts of things, the wraith tested. But not to what I'm talking about. They commit to everything that doesn't take them inside, truly inside. They won't dive into that sea, or they do, but they will close their eyes to it and follow paths blindly, all the while governed by forces they don't want to know about, that they deny. Too often people just stand on the border, enticing, but never actually giving anything. It's like women have become what they always complained of men being. I have even found myself, on multiple occasions, finding myself of all people having to actually push to even acknowledge the complexities and nuances of emotional interaction. That was women's ground, for all this time, their language. Men had little to do with it. Now no one knows that language. How did you come to know it? I took it upon myself to learn. I learned it so that I would be able to understand it. I may be a man, but I'm aware of what rules me. It's like body language or any other language. It has vocabulary and grammar, sensitivities and proclivities. I learned it because I understood it to be important to women, and because all of the men in my tribe had taken it upon themselves to understand it, to some extent at least. But that doesn't make it usual. The point is that it is a language, and it must be understood to be kept alive. It must be spoken to be understood, and it must be real. When people don't feel anything but the most superficial trained monkey reactions to a complicated haze of moronic, distracting stimuli, and only speak of it in a steadily depreciating language, it shouldn't be a surprise when they become effectively mute on the topic, like men were. And not just mute, but simply disengaged, unaware, like none of that stuff matters. I found myself saying to a woman that we have to understand that people have roles to play, that our interactions are not meaningless, that they are not without consequence. It wasn't the first person I found myself making this point to. Something she had said made me feel an almost total disregard for the concept, the ease with which she claimed total immunity from responsibility, while enjoying what once would have only come with responsibility. I told her the roles were developed to be the posts and beams of the social structure we exist in. They developed because having that structure was discovered to be preferable to living without it, and the structure proved foundational to everything we've been able to build. It is the weave that underlies and gives body to the tapestry that in fact allows the tapestry to grow, to actually live. Ah yes, the tapestry. So you discovered what it is made of, the wraith said. You may mock me, but why should I have to explain this stuff again and again and again? How is it this stuff is lost? Years ago, I was not the first to argue against the relativist, subjectivist way, to argue that it leads to a vacuum of purpose. And yet that idea, that fundamental approach, is precisely what has allowed all of what we should value to fall away. And the consequence is this isolation, not to mention the coming storm, which has been all but forgotten. Now I fear we see an even further stage of that culture of directionless disposability. It hasn't retracted. We are seeing now the children of those who embraced, without even really thinking about it, that way. The children don't even have the cohesive parameters of their parents, let alone their grandparents, and yet now is when it is needed most. Then, I should say, then it was too late. We had already lost. That's why I talk about the difficulty of pulling through when weakest, because it has import, it ties into everything. Man poisoned himself, or rather, man was poisoned to begin with, and it allowed him to defile with his grubbiness the well he drinks from and the food he eats. He poisoned everything. He drew everything to himself, sought for some reason to live in his own waste, like a dog that never learned from its mother to clean the den. Well, I've lived in that world. You just hear the stories. I've also lived in the fairy kingdom, and even that wasn't all delight. It's not like it was without fear and insecurity, or weakness and fallibility. It was beautiful and dreadful at once. The beauty brought joy enough to entrap, but there is a certain knowledge that comes with that joy. The joy comes with a catch. It means you get to see your own fallibility. It means you get to see mortality for what it is. It means you get to see death. It means you experience sorrow, and that you will live in sorrow henceforth. This is because the experience of that other world ruins forever those who seek it and live. They learn delight, and then they see the truth of their filth. This is not a judgment. I'm just saying that is what it is. It doesn't mean the seer is disgusted by the sufferers, though in some cases he may very well be. But no, it means the seer is disgusted by the force that undermines, the force that causes people to live so wretchedly, that causes them to cling to the extent that there is too little to go around, too many to feed, too many to account for, too many to educate or to help. There isn't even consensus on how anyone should be helped or educated, or even that they should be. There isn't even consensus on whether there is even a problem that needs to be addressed. You can't fix people down the road. People will say you can, but generally you can't. Most people, no, pretty much all people, are going to have to learn to live with their faults, and they will, if they care to look, be able to track the strains of those faults in their lives, perhaps where they began, how they played out. There is only management, but management requires education, if it is to be meaningful. And all the while, it is not uncommon for education itself to be despised. Clearly, where it can't be trusted, it should be despised, but no one knows what grounds to apply in order to determine what to trust and what not to trust. People just trust anything that feels right. But it's been a long time since some people started to realize they can manipulate other people who don't know what to believe. And those some people know how to make those other people believe practically anything they want simply by making them feel good. And so generally people trust what those around them trust, no matter how faulty or how ridiculous it is. And that's how the isolation crept up and the seas died. All the while a new force built up, a force that needn't have been there, but which was fed until it was huge. We can't expect to face down that force while distracted with bloat, confusion and corruption, with schizophrenic response mechanisms. It was never going to happen. So what is the answer? Education. But how? Who agrees? There is no consensus. First, half of everyone would have to die. We would have to turn into those insects, a race of eunuchs. We would have to become warriors, sacrifice our genes in war. It doesn't bear thinking about, but that is what no one was talking about while they shouted from isolation about this and that, for a return to normal when that normal was destroying everything. What cold planner did not realize what the hand would look like that would solve so many of man's problems? A thinning of the herd, a response to the weight man carries, the weight he hefts through the woods, crushing and breaking all in his path. When does nature not respond to bloat? That's the thing about nature. When you look at it, you see yourself. You see everything within you depicted somewhere in nature's form. We are collectives of animal elements in that way. But we don't just exhibit, we intensify. We apply our ability to everything we do, and we are effective, so effective that our competition is no longer with other animals, but with each other. And we try to outdo each other with the same intensity we applied to surviving in all the millions of years of our past. Self-preservation is a check. People are still afraid of death. They still respond to death. They also realize there is something to be gained from maintaining life, that the greater gain for the individual competitor is from controlling life, not directly destroying it, unless it is something other than human, that is. Generally, individuals have to be in groups, really, to get up to speed where killing each other is concerned. Individuals will have a go, but the real numbers are in socially sanctioned killing on a large scale. "You mock death," said the Wraith. "No, I don't mock death. I mock life, specifically the absurd double standard man takes in approaching life. I'm not saying man doesn't take an absurd view of death, but I don't mock it because at least death is invisible until people arrive here to sit with you. And anyway, why shouldn't you be mocked? You mock me, you mock all of us. You mock us by making us speak of our lives. And every time you hear the pride of a life, the joy of a life, the sadness of a life, the disappointment, you mock it by merely being part of the process that exposes something that deserves only mockery." The Wraith responded, "Would you take away from those who have done more than you?" The man responded, "No, I wouldn't. I am in awe of them, in a way. But their accomplishments are rarely what they are amounted to be. Even the best is ultimately undermined by the fact that it is weighed down by all that clings to it. And so they work with that weight, heroic in that sense. But what do they work for? Are they heroic for swimming with the tide, or speeding it somehow? Alternatively, what do they actually expect by swimming against the tide? I put it that way because effort is only as good as what it is directed towards. And so any effort that goes so far as to show up for you must be great, and that would mean it swam against the current, because the prevailing current as you know it is surely not something you can love. I mean, how can you, death, love lives that so despise you, that so shun you?" The old gods weren't like that. They didn't require the shunning of death. Men died like animals caught in fire on an open plain. They died drowning. They died axe in hand. Now you get the decrepit, the fat and the diseased, the stupid. And yes, the others too, but how many in between? Truly, how are your games going? You must be playing a lot of them. Are you satisfied with the stories you are hearing from those infinite tellers who don't even have language anymore to speak, let alone to have something to say? You are too cruel. Death laughed, shuddering momentarily the streams of sand. You see, I told you, you mock. You mock every one of them. I know it means nothing to you in the end, but it wouldn't surprise me if even you recognized what I speak of. And so while it sounds cruel, there is in fact nothing cruel about it. The only cruelty is that people go through the process and then have to sit here by your gate to relive it. Can you not imagine that may be a joy for many? What joy? Who can avoid thinking of all the rest? What do you mean? I mean there is no joy to be had from so much misery. What they are feeling is not joy. The only way to feel what they are feeling is by failing to take into account that for all of the satisfaction they hold, there is an equal dissatisfaction to be had. If they knew joy, then they would know sorrow. They would not be able to rejoice. It would not be possible for them to rejoice. To do so would seem completely irresponsible, utterly unsympathetic. Such a response would seem to indicate a sort of sociopathy. Should everyone be solemn? I have played with people who took that path. You would have found them dire. No doubt I would, because I'm not like that myself. I like a bit of fire, a bit of play, a bit of laughter. Perhaps I like a little chaos, or at least I expect it, and I don't like to pretend I've surpassed it. That's what bothers me about those who have achieved. Of course, everyone achieves exactly what they achieve, but the confines of the field are too tight. No one steps straight into heaven from here, even the solemn. But I will say that the only chapels I can stomach are those that are solemn. Solemn in their plain stone, solemn in their pews of old wood, solemn in their silence. Death hissed. The chapels you love were once painted in the brightest colors. Perhaps you would have found them gaudy if you saw them as they were intended to be seen. The man, energized, carried on. Perhaps, but it doesn't matter how they were intended. What I am saying is that stone and wood and silence are solemn. Perhaps they are what remain when all the bullshit has been stripped away, when all the pretense of life is gone, when time itself has peeled the paint or dried it to dust to eventually fall like sand to the ground, like those souls that fall from your sleeves to evaporate away to only you know where. Death hissed. The paintings were removed during a period of great solemnity. The man, undaunted, carried on. I know, and I know it didn't go well, that it got out of hand. For God's sake, what were they thinking? Stripping the angels away. Madness. No different from cutting the old trees. A sea of living cathedral columns, unique in the world, stripped from the land. It's that vein of thinking again, same as those people who took science too far, who discarded morality along with religion, who failed to take into account that their model provided no means by which to establish direction other than opportunity. It didn't matter what the opportunity ultimately was or what costs there may prove to be, just go for it. Discovery was left without a rudder. No, it was left without a captain. Or maybe it had a captain, but he was a Captain Ahab-type character, a force of nature without any means of controlling himself, let alone perceiving the truth of himself. Whatever. Also, they weren't all gaudy. Some were exquisite and true. But I know enough to know you were right when you say that I would find that solemnity dire. But you were the one that brought it up. And while what you refer to is related to what I am talking about, it is not what I am talking about. We are not stone columns. We do well to listen to stone, but we don't need to pretend to be stone. We are made of water for the most part. It's about intention, about usage of energy. Water takes a path provided. It wishes to get back to the sea, and all the way it rolls and swirls, dives and rises, rushes, breaks and makes wet, splashing over rocks, but always down, always the shortest path to the sea. It is fluid and seems playful, but it has purpose. For at the sea, the warmth of the sun will lift it high into the sky, to collect it in billowing clouds so it may fall again to nourish. In the sun, those drops break light into color. Together they provide the body for rainbows that bestride entire landscapes. Individually, in looping arcs of broken stream water, they cast prismatic flashes, so tiny and fast as to be hardly seen. And yet with that color, with that play, comes the solemnity of water's purpose, life. Man took a great risk in despoiling the ocean and the waterways that feed it. Light doesn't play in dirty water, and land without water might as well just be stone. That's not what's going to be best for us. No, there is much to be learned from stone, but that isn't what we ultimately are. We do well to embrace our warmth, our joy, but we also do well to keep it in check and to remember what we are and where we are. It's when we forgot those that we got ourselves into trouble. We became too exuberant. We took it all for granted, waving hands in the air thinking we had it all sorted out while the whole thing was dying. And while we ourselves became distorted within the context of our own creation, itself a reflection of what made it, not exactly our best selves. We forget that what we made was not all of what we could make. It was what was made based on who we were and what we were dealing with. We couldn't see what had happened to us. It wasn't our fault the correction wasn't made. We didn't create our programming. We were monkeys given the power to destroy ourselves. What did the universe expect to happen? Maybe you can answer that. In fact, go on, answer it. I want to hear what you have to say. I'm only talking because I'm struck with that same disease that destroyed everyone else. The Wraith, seemingly amused, asked, "You want to know what the universe expected to happen by setting man on his course?" "Yes." "Why should I care about that? Do I not merely pick up the pieces? Am I not the universe's recycling man, to use the terminology of your world? I just take the lives." "Bullshit. I'm here. What difference does it make if you tell me? So my game will be extended by a few minutes, and you've got time." The Wraith seemed to laugh. "It is true, I have time. I would expound on it myself, but I'm ruled by my heart. I don't trust people who have the capacity to overrule their heart. You never know what they will do. By armoring themselves from vulnerability, they hide, they become cold. They can turn on you. People like that are scary to someone like me. Most people are like that, and they have forgotten what it was to be accountable in spirit. Laws replace spirit. Not a bad development in some respects, but you can't have civilization without governance. Self-governance, community governance, state governance. People need to be able to govern themselves, or the laws they make will be those that are what everyone is comfortable with as they are, and not what they need to be, and not what they would be if those writing them were ruled by, say, a personal and true connection with water. So what on earth did the universe expect? The Wraith said, "It got exactly what it expected, and yet not exactly what it expected. One thought, correction was needed. It made no difference to me." "I don't believe you. You must hear the stories." "I hear the stories, and yes, little time is spent on many. So it does make a difference. I am, as you would put it, sympathetic to the thought that a correction should have been made. I have seen you chuckle, I have seen you amused in your cold way. That is why I thought you would care. When I saw you chuckle, I could imagine you bored." The Wraith acknowledged the man's point. "Very well, I will play. It is true I can be bored. I am not like you, but yes, I do notice the stories. More than that, I collect them. I am their keeper. A library of lives. I also watched as what you call the isolation set in. I attend to this world, appearing as relevant to each. I have done so since the beginning. I used to think of the stories as jewels, not all as bright as any other, each with inclusions, mists and hazes, but each, large or small, bright or dim, had a light that I could clearly see inside. That was the difference between myself and my brother. He sought the lions, the bulls, the boars. He sought the largest, brightest stones, the ones of richest color, those of only strong, clear light. I sought everything, the entire breadth of sentience since the forebears of man. It was not for me to judge, only to bear witness, every one of the dead equal in death. He insisted he take some, the ones he chose, those he considered the best. He pushed me on that. I would have put it all back into the ether, but he was firm. He would have his skin. He saw before I did what was happening. He saw his proceeds diminishing. The sinew was not the same. I had missed the change because, looking at so many at once, I could not see it. He pushed me again, but while still I held, by then, before I even believed my brother, I could feel the difference, and I looked back at the stories. I realized there had grown to be so many that I had not noticed they had become shorter, that they were emptier of content. I was playing the games listlessly. Many could hardly speak, both because of insufficient thought and insufficient language. I live embodied by sand, by the grains of the lives I take. The lives are my food. I have no life without them. That is my existence. I took more and more, and yet I remained unsatiated. My brother kept telling me there was something wrong, that it needed to be fixed, that man was dying. There is nothing I can do about it, though he blames me. In these last generations, the stories have increased, but they are dimmed and empty. but still I provide him those stories he wants, and he can do something about it if he thinks it worthwhile. The man said, I'll tell you a set of stories. You can see if they bore you. I will tell them according to the way of that sand that falls from your robe. According to the laws of time, I will take my time. The wraith replied, You may take your time, but remember that I have heard all that man has to say. The man asked, Is that not the problem, that it seems that way? The wraith replied, Perhaps. It is just that I know what you will tell me before you do. It is not the story that interests me so much as the energy of the life it contains. I could tell you stories of anything. I could tell you all about my last meal. Would you prefer that? Many speak to me of food. And all I imagine speak to you of women, so that is what I will do. If that is what you think appropriate when faced with death, then do so, but first tell me why. Because it is through them that I know of the existence of what I seek. No, not the existence, I already know that. I'm looking for the outlines. I can't remember what she looked like, so I look for her traits in others. You think you will recognize her based on that? Yes, not just her superficial appearance, you understand. I mean her spirit, how her spirit appears in her body and in her mind, and in the nature of her eyes. You have been searching all this time. Has it not been a distraction? Yes, but perhaps a necessary one. Do you find what you are looking for? I see both what I look for and also what is not of her. And when I see what is not of her, the wolf bristles and becomes impatient if I do not just leave. I believe the wolf already knows. He is just waiting for me to find out on my own. As always, he watches while I flounder, and then eventually he summons me and nips me, and I have to obey and apologize as I leave. If he has not muzzled me already, that is. The man looked for a moment at the board and at the pieces. He looked at the wraith, at the ever-pouring sand. He looked back at the board and at his queen. The only sound was the passing of the sand into the breeze, some across the table between the pieces. He could hear its gentle shuffle. His heart slowed with the sound, and he closed his eyes, and gently hypnotized, he spoke. The flower, the daughter of neighbors. Discernible petals of white light emerged as a halo from her tiny sun-like being. Later, her field became the cave, the seed of the dark, the source of the fear.